Hi everyone, welcome to this AWS CLI tutorial. I am Aziz Mohamed and I'm excited to walk you through one of the most powerful tools for working with AWS, the command line interface or CLI. You might be used to using AWS Management Console, which is a fantastic web interface for managing your cloud resources. But as your projects grow more complex, there is a need to speed up and automate processes. That's where AWS CLI comes in. The CLI allows you to manage AWS services directly from your terminal or command prompt. Why should you care? Well, using the CLI offers several advantages. You can script repetitive tasks, perform tasks faster without navigating through pages, avoid errors that might occur when clicking around the console. In today's video, we are going to cover some foundational AWS CLI topics: installation and basic configuration, using profiles for multi-account management, dealing with S3 packets including patch uploads, integrating the CLI into bash scripts for task automation, debugging your CLI commands for better error handling. Whether you are just getting started or already familiar with AWS, I will show you how to level up your cloud management skills. Let's dive in. Before we dive into these cool features, we need to install AWS CLI if you don't already have it. You can find the detailed installation guide on the AWS documentation here. Be sure to select the installation that match your operating system, Linux, macOS, or Windows. Pay special attention to the version of the AWS. If you have AWS CLI version 1 in your machine, please migrate it to AWS version 2 so that you can follow along with all the features that we are going to cover in this video. Once you install it, let's confirm the version that you installed it on your machine by writing this command on the terminal, AWS --version. If you have a similar output on your screen, that confirms that you have installed the AWS CLI correctly. Now, after you install the AWS CLI and to be able to configure your AWS CLI on your machine, we need to add a new user to AWS and use it as a default user for your machine. Why do we need to add a new user? AWS recommends that we use a separate user for each person or application that we use it to access the account. This way, you can manage permissions individually, ensuring the better security and controls. In your AWS Management Console, open the IAM service and navigate to create a new user. For the username, write something that's very specific to this application or to this machine. So let's write AWS CLI. We don't need access to the management. We need just the application access, which is basically the credentials, the key and secret. So next, what do we need this user for? In my case, I already have some groups that I can add this user to. If you don't have or you need to create a new group, just create it here and attach the user to this group. So I'm going to add this user to admin group, which the default group for administrator on your account. Create it and give it the administrator access and add the user to this group. Next, here we have the review screen. We need to create the user. Once the user is created, let's open the user and create some credentials that we can use them from the machine. Create access key. You need to mention that we are going to use it for the command line interface and ignore the recommendation that AWS gave it for us. And the next, create the access keys. Be careful here because this is the last time you are going to see this screen. So immediately copy the key and the secret access key somewhere in your machine so that you can use them later when we configure the AWS CLI. Now press done. Because I already have these credentials in my machine, I'm not going to copy them. So now I will continue, but AWS are not going to show these credentials again. Awesome. Now that you have installed AWS CLI, the next step is to configure it so that you can start interacting with your AWS account. Why we configure the CLI? This step will allow you to securely access your AWS resources without re-entering your credentials each time. Think of it as unlocking the gateway to your AWS environment. Let's use the AWS configure command. It's going to prompt you enter the access key and secret access key region and preferred output format. Let's do that. AWS configure. Because I already configured my AWS console, I don't need to enter these details again. But for you, you have to grab your access key and access secret key from your AWS environment. For example, here the region is US East 1. You can change this region for whatever region you want. And I will leave it with the default format. You can change it to anything like JSON, for example. And that's it. After you run the AWS configure command, you need to confirm that this command worked properly. So there is a command that called the STS service of AWS to get the caller identity so that you make sure that you authenticated to AWS and viewed the proper user. So let's write AWS STS, that's the name of the service, get caller identity, showing the user ID and account, and ARN. Running the STS get caller identity command should show you your default user ID, account, and the ARN of your user, the user that you are using in your machine. Now, imagine you are working with multiple AWS accounts, maybe one for development, another for production. Logging in and out of the console can be a pain, right? That's where AWS CLI profiles come to the picture. You can set up multiple profiles and switch between them seamlessly. Let's configure a profile for the dev account and a different profile for the production account and see how it works. AWS configure --profile dev. As you can see, you should enter the details that entered already for the default AWS configure command, and by mentioning them all, you have configured the dev account. If we swap this dev with production, you have the chance to enter all details again. Now, when you run any command, how would you mention this profile? You can run a command against the dev account and different command against the production account without logging off and logging on in the console. When, for example, we run AWS S3 ls command, you can just mention the profile here and say it is against the dev. Of course, because I did not configure it properly, it wouldn't work. But in your case, you make sure that you add the key and access key properly. What if I need to make a default profile for the terminal session that I'm working on now? In this case, I need to export a variable called AWS underscore profile, all caps, and make it equal whatever account I want to do, like dev. Let's run same command now, but without mentioning the profile. So AWS S3 ls. So because we have a default profile, it's running against this profile. After being able to switch between accounts in your AWS CLI, let's now dive into one of the interesting or one of the important commands that you will use multiple times with your CLI, which is the AWS S3 commands. In this demo, I'm going to create a new bucket and show you how you copy a list of files into your bucket in one command. So no need to upload the files one by one, but this is called the batch processing. You can upload these files in a batch by running one AWS command. Let's create the bucket first. AWS S3 MB, which make bucket, and the bucket name should be named like this, S3. Let's come out with a name that wouldn't be repeated. So test S3 create B demo 1, 2, 3. This make bucket command output confirm that the bucket is created. After we upload the files into the bucket, we will show it in the console and see the files in it. Let's create some files that we can upload them to the S3 bucket. So touch 1, touch A, touch B, touch D, touch D, ls. Now we have 4 files A, B, C, D. And instead of uploading them one by one, we can upload all these files together in one batch command. Now let's run the S3 copy command that will copy these files into AWS S3 bucket in a batch. So AWS S3 CP, the local folder. And if you remember our S3 bucket name, it's S3 test S3 create B demo 1 to 3. You need to create it with a different name to be accepted. And with recursive command, recursive parameter, run. Okay, so it uploaded all the files that we have just created. Let's check this S3 bucket in our AWS management console. As you can see, it's created here already with the default region of my account. It could be created in a different region if your default region was different than US East 1. So you need to make sure that you select the proper region. Open it and let's refresh. Yes, the 4 files were uploaded to the S3 bucket. So that's how you do some batch processing with AWS commands. This is an example. There are multiple examples of batch processing with different services that you can use AWS command to do. Now, Here is where things get really interesting. Up until now, we've covered basics, installation, configuration, and managing resources like S3 buckets. But real power comes when you start integrating the AWS CLI into scripts. The next section will show you how to supercharge your workflows by incorporating the AWS CLI into Bash scripts. Whether it's automating a series of tasks or building pipelines, this is where you start acting like a true cloud engineer. If you have ever thought there is got to be a faster way to do this, well, the answer is often Bash scripting with AWS CLI. Let's move forward and unlock the full potential of command line automation. We've covered a lot today, from setting up the AWS CLI to working with S3, managing multiple profiles, and even diving into Bash scripting and debugging. As you can see, advanced cloud engineers prefer the CLI because it allowed them to be more efficient, script repetitive tasks, and manage resources at scale. By integrating AWS CLI into your Bash files, you can automate any routine cloud management task. The benefits: huge time savings, fewer human errors, and consistency in how you manage your cloud infrastructure. Imagine setting up automated backups, scaling infrastructure, or performing user system health checks, all with a script that runs on autopilot. Let's take a simple example. Say you need to take a daily snapshot of an RDS instance or RDS cluster, as you see here. Instead of logging the AWS Management Console every day, you can write a Bash script like this to automate the task. As you can see here, we are running the command to create a snapshot of a cluster that's existing in our setup. We need to make the cluster name dependent on our day because we are going to run this daily. So we have the date here, the cluster name, and the identifier of the snapshot. If you run this Bash script within your environment, it will access the AWS and create the snapshot. Let's run the Bash script that we just finished. That's expected if you have Linux or Mac OS that you need to add permission to the file first. So let's add chmod +x and the file and run it. That's the output of the command when we run create a snapshot from the database. Let's go to the AWS Management Console and see the snapshot being created. So here is our database cluster in AWS Management Console. So as you can see, if you scroll down to the snapshots panel, it shows snapshot creating with our naming that we added, the name plus the date. Let's refresh to see. So now it's available. Okay, that's how we created the snapshot of the database using AWS command inside a Bash script. Now, let's talk about extracting specific data from AWS services. Have you ever run a command in AWS CLI and received a massive JSON output? That's overwhelming to sift through. James Path is a query language that built into AWS CLI that allows you to extract exactly what you need from these complex JSON responses. The power of James Path lies in its ability to filter, transform, and structure the data returned by AWS CLI. Instead of spending time scrolling through JSON files to find that one instance ID or IP address, you can use James Path to extract just what you need with a single command. Here is a simple example. Imagine you are mapping several EC2 instances and you want to retrieve all the instance IDs. Without James Path, you would have to comb through pages of JSON. But the James Path, you can run this command and get only the instance IDs neatly presented. From now on, I'm going to use Bash scripts to run the commands. It's easily managed and stored, and we can present it nicely on the screen as well, so that you can see the commands better than seeing it in the terminal. Look at this command. We are going to scribe instances from EC2, but using the query James Path like this. James Path is a very famous query language. You can search it on Google, but for now, what you need to do to understand is like the reservations, all instances, all instance ID. This query should return all instance in your region. So let's run this command. It's called query.bash, as you see from the file here. Yes, these are all the instances that we have in our AWS account and region. So as you can see, it returned the instance IDs only without the whole JSON that will be very difficult to read and discover what IDs exactly in the list. Here is another example that let's say you not only want to instance IDs but also the public IP addresses of all running instances. instead of manually searching for this in JSON output, you can use GemsPath again to extract both fields and display them in a proper format. For example, here we can control the format of the output. So if we save this file and run it again, as you can see the output in a table, each instance ID with the proper IP address. This third one may be not running, that's why it doesn't have an IP address now. Let's see another way of using GemsPath. For this command, for example, that's how you filter the instance we have so that we show only the running instances. Let's save this one. That is the syntax of filtration here. When you run it, you see only the IDs of the instance that's running. So that one is excluded from the list now. With GemsPath, we can even go more advanced. So let's look at this GemsPath query that uses nested structures of the JSON and query data from these objects. If we save this one and run it here, as you can see, we could even get more details from the nested structures of the instance object. In conclusion, with GemsPath, in addition to AWS CLI, we could achieve efficiency because GemsPath helps us to focus on just the data we need, eliminating the time spent shifting through large data sets. We achieved also clarity. It makes your output clearer and more structured, whether you need tables, text, or JSON format. Automation friendly. If you're incorporating AWS CLI commands into scripts, GemsPath lets you extract the path only the relevant data to the next steps in your automation workflow. This is huge when we're working with automation scripts or trying to quickly retrieve important information, especially in large complex AWS environment. GemsPath lets you tailor the AWS CLI output to fit your exact requirement. Let's talk about saving time and working smarter, not harder. If you are using AWS CLI frequently, typing out long commands over and over can become a bit tedious, right? This is where aliases came into play. Aliases are shortcuts that allow you to create custom, easy-to-remember commands for your most used AWS CLI tasks. Think of them as nicknames for long commands that you frequently use. With aliases, you can speed up your workflow and eliminate the need for repetitive typing. Why use a CLI aliases? Number one, efficiency. No need to repeatedly type out long or complex commands. With an alias, you can accomplish tasks with just a few keystrokes. Number two, consistency. Aliases ensure you are using the same command every time, reducing the chance for errors or typos. Number three, personalization. You can create custom commands that fit your specific workflow, making AWS CLI more tailored to your needs. Here is an example. Let's say you frequently list the S3 buckets in your account. Instead of typing the full AWS S3 command each time, you can create an alias to shorten it. Let's see how you achieve that with the alias. So alias is a keyword in AWS CLI. So if you type alias AWS list buckets equal AWS S3 that means every time you run this command, you will achieve the AWS S3 list command. If you run this and let's run AWS list buckets, AWS list. As you can see, it's exactly the same as AWS S3 Let's go more advanced and combine the GemsPath with the alias so that you can shorten a very long command into a very short keyword. This command, for example, makes AWS status equal to a list of S3 with describe instance and combining S3 and EC2 together. If you run this one and let's write AWS status. So now we achieved a kind of complex command or two commands together in a very short AWS status command. We can even make the alias is permanent in your machine. If you write this alias command in your bash boot file like this will make it permanent so that when you restart your machine or close the terminal and open it again, you can use this command forever. I'm not going to run it because I don't want this command to be permanent on my machine, but you can run it on your machine for sure. So to conclude the aliases part, by creating custom aliases, you take full control of your AWS CLI experience. No more retyping long commands, no more worrying about syntax error, just a streamlined, personalized workflow that fits how you work. Whether you are automating tasks or just looking for a quicker way to manage your AWS resources, aliases are a simple yet powerful tool that can dramatically boost your productivity. Now let's talk about one more tool in your bucket of infrastructure tools that you use AWS CLI for, which is debugging. With debugging, AWS CLI offers powerful logging and debugging tools to help you track down issues and understand what's happening when commands are executed. Why do we use logging and debugging? Visibility, number one. See exactly what happens during a command's execution. 2. Faster troubleshooting. Identify errors and misconfigurations quickly. Number 3. Auditability. Store commands outputs for later review, useful for compliance or debugging automation failures. Let's discover how we use debugging with AWS CLI. It's very easy. Just use the --debug parameter when you run the commands. Here is an example. The describe instances with debug. As you can see, it's a very huge output that show more than what I need for now. But of course, if you have a problem, if you need to discover something for your instance, will be very useful. In addition to debugging, you can store the output of any commands into a log file, which enhance the auditability and logging of your AWS commands. So look at this one, for example. That means it store all the output of describe instance command into the instances.log file. You can even go more advanced and add the debugging information into this file, like this. If I open the file now, it showed the outcomes of the command that we just ran. This is very useful when you troubleshoot something happen in your environment, or if you want to dig deeper into the instance you are looking at. That's how you use the debugging and logging in AWS CLI commands. In conclusion, by using logging and debugging, you get clear insights into AWS CLI commands, making troubleshooting faster and your operations more transparent. Whether in day-to-day use or in automation, these features provide critical visibility to ensure everything runs smoothly. In this video, you learned how to use the AWS CLI to perform common tasks more efficiently, and also how to troubleshoot and debug issues, which is essential when dealing with complex cloud infrastructures. To wrap things up, we saw how CLI can simplify multi-account management with profiles. We explored ways to handle batch uploads to S3, automating the process. Finally, we integrated everything into scripts, which is the real key to boosting your cloud workflows. Keep practicing with AWS CLI, and you'll soon find that it's a must-have tool in your cloud toolkit. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more cloud engineering content. I will see you in the next one.